We have some really, really unfortunate news kind of coming out here, and some people are speculating it's a lot worse than what we're kind of being told. Some people are even saying Maxx Crosby's injury prone at this point. We're going to talk about it. If you guys did not hear, Adam Schefter put this out 2 days ago, that Maxx Crosby, who had been limited in Wednesday's practice, did not practice on Thursday due to a knee injury. And this was weird because usually if a player doesn't practice, Adam Schefter is not the one that's really putting it out there, right? Like, Adam Schefter is not telling us, hey, Lamar didn't practice, or, Joe Alt's hurt, or whoever it is, right? Like, for a guy not to practice is not that big of news, but for Adam Schefter to put this out there, some people started to speculate that, hey, maybe the knee is actually worse than what we're kind of told at this point. But Maxx Crosby practiced on Wednesday in a limited fashion, did not practice on Thursday. Adam Schefter dropped this report. And of course, today the Raiders had their final practice for that Broncos game. Once again, no Maxx Crosby at the Raiders practice today. So it seems like Maxx Crosby will be doubtful, if not just ruled out for this game against the Broncos. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays, to be honest. Max has kind of done this in the past. But I wouldn't also be surprised if he's just ruled out. And here's the thing. Some people will say, hey, Maxx Crosby, if he's hurt or not, it wouldn't make sense. The Raiders are trying to tank. But remember, Pete Carroll's not looking to tank. Pete Carroll, according to reports, is even pushing Colt Miller to come back as soon as possible. Pete Carroll's trying to finish the season strong. He's trying to be 5-0 as the final 5 games come up. He wants to be, 7-10 or whatever the record ends up being. Pete Carroll wants to try to win as many games as possible to prove that he should be the Raiders coach going into next season. So Pete Carroll's not going to allow Maxx Crosby to sit out, essentially, right? So I don't think this injury has anything to do with Maxx Crosby and tanking. I think there's more to this. And other people have pointed that out as well, right? So I'm not the first person saying this. But some people are saying, is Maxx Crosby injury prone? Now I want you guys to check out Maxx Crosby's injuries that have kind of happened in 2023. Maxx Crosby, remember, he had this knee injury that happened in 2023. It popped up super early on in the season. We didn't even really know about it until I think week 12, which was, I believe this was the Chiefs game. It may have been, it may not have been the Chiefs game, but I don't know if you guys remember 2023. This is when Antonio Pierce had just kind of taken over. There was a moment in which Maxx Crosby did not practice in any of the 3 practices for the week. He was doubtful going into that game, but he still ended up playing. But the knee injury, we were told after the season, after the 2023 season finished, we were told it was a lot worse than what people kind of realized. And I believe Maxx Crosby was even hospitalized at some point in that 2023 season at the end of the season. And I don't remember if he had to get surgery on the knee after the 2023 season, but I do know for a fact in 2024, he had the ankle injury that ended up happening, and you guys can see it here. 2024, basically the ankle injury just kind of followed him over the course of the 2024 season. He had ankle injury at the end of the season, right? So I know that to be a fact. I don't remember if he had knee surgery in 2023. But people are now saying, hey, Max has now had some injury issues over the last couple of seasons. If you guys now think about 2025, he had a knee injury early on this season, right? Crosby suffered a minor knee and back injuries during week 7 against the Chiefs. This first popped up, and now, as of week 12, he's been on the injury report every single week. And he's played, obviously, the last couple of weeks, but we're now hearing that Max may actually miss time due to that knee injury. So we don't know the extent of this injury, but some people are actually speculating that the injury is worse than what we're kind of being told. And I hope that's not the case. I would love for Max to be able to play against different Broncos, but if he has any sort of pain, which, if you're not able to practice, to me, that means you have some pain, Maxx Crosby should just sit out. Surgery needed or not, long-term health of Max should be by far the most important factor for the Raiders as we go forward. I don't care if we lose the rest of these games. If on the other side of this, if Max plays hurt and we win every game, I'd much rather just lose every game if Maxx Crosby is hurt, and that potentially means he could get even hurt further on that knee, right? I think for the Raiders, it is so important to make sure our players right now stay healthy. Colt Miller, JPJ, Maxx Crosby. But some people are speculating, like, is there something with Max in the knee? I'm going to take a step back and say probably not. I don't think this is like last year where he had to get ankle surgery, or even the year before that where the knee injury was really, really bad. I don't think that's what this is because, when I watch his tape and he's out there playing, he still looks healthy to me. Maybe it's a PCL injury, which is different than what he had 2 years ago. A PCL injury, maybe not as bad as what Brock Bowers had, but that could still impact you, right? And sometimes it gets worse if you play on it for 2 or 3 weeks. I don't think this is this is the type of injury that's a cause of concern necessarily. But I do hope Maxx Crosby gets healthy. And I do hope the Raiders kind of look towards these next couple of games and say, hey, we're going to figure out what this team is. As a roster, we're going to figure out which offensive lineman should stick for next season. As a roster, we're going to look at some of the young defensive linemen, Malcolm Koonce, Tyree Wilson. There's a massive decision the Raiders have to make this offseason with Tyree Wilson. They got to decide if they're going to pick up his 5th-year option. So before the start of your 4th year, you have to decide on the 5th-year option. I don't know exactly when the deadline is, but it'll be this offseason at some point. Maybe before the new league year starts. I believe that's like March 3rd or somewhere around that time. You have to make that decision. And I would much rather see Tyree Wilson play 60 snaps a game for the next 5 weeks than a healthy Maxx Crosby where the injury could potentially get worse. I do hope the Raiders actually focus and allow us to kind of learn about the rest of this roster. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Watching the Raiders play at this point, it's painful for how bad they are. And it's the same thing every single week, right? It's the offensive lineman can't protect. Geno Smith can't make his reads and can't properly get the ball to his wide receivers. The receivers unable to separate. Our offensive play calling is just bad, right? Like top to bottom, it's just bad and bad and bad and bad, right? Like it's just not fun to watch at this point. But if the Raiders do roll forward with some of the younger guys, at least there's some upside with some of these guys. You can roll forward with Geno, but if you feel like, hey, we don't want Geno to have to play behind an offensive line that features Caleb Rogers, that features Charles Grant, or even some of the other guys that may not have the experience as guys like Stone Forsythe or whatever, you could even go to Aiden O'Connell or Kenny Pickett, right? If the Raiders feel like Geno Smith's still the future for the Raiders and you don't want to risk an injury, go with one of the younger guys. I think the Raiders could learn so much more by saying, hey, we're going to put Charles Grant in at right tackle or left tackle, right? Either one works. And then, of course, Caleb Rogers, let's start this guy. Last week, he ended up playing. He looked pretty good. Antonio Mafi also played for the Raiders. He looked pretty good as well. And the Denver Broncos have one of the better defensive lines, right? They got guys like Zach Allen, who I think is one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. I think he's a top 5 to 6 defensive tackle. A lot of people don't know who Zach Allen is, but the guy's an absolute stud. And then more than Zach Allen, you have Nick Bonito, who's a very good pass rusher. Your linebackers, you got guys like Drake Greenlaw, Alex Singleton. These are, that's a good defense right there. I'd much rather watch Caleb Rogers, potentially struggle a little bit against some of these guys, right? Potentially get his ass kicked a little bit, and then in the hopes that allows him to develop. I'd much rather see that than a guy like Alex Kapler or Will Putnam that might not ever actually play for the Raiders as we go forward. Maybe not Will Putnam. Maybe Putnam can, develop into a good player. But like Alex Kapler, Jordan Meredith, that doesn't make sense to me. Jordan Meredith did practice this week, and some of the reporters do think he'll end up starting for the Raiders as he gets healthy, which means Caleb Rogers could once again kind of go back to the bench. But Caleb Rogers looked pretty good, right? Like, I saw more from Caleb Rogers in those 17 snaps that he played than I've seen from Jordan Meredith this entire season. That makes me feel like Jordan Meredith could be the future. Jordan Meredith is not much different than a guy like Andre James. Very, very similar players, similar body structures, right? They're just not strong enough. At the end of the day, those two guys will always get pushed around by like the Chris Jones or, the Christian Barmores, right? The guys that are just bigger and stronger. They will always push around Andre James. They'll always push around Jordan Meredith, Alex Kappa, right? Cody Whitehair. These guys are all kind of the same mold of players. They're not strong, right? They're not physical. They're going to get beat up. Caleb Rogers at least has some upside, right? And I think for the Raiders, you have to figure it out, for next season essentially. And I understand, people are saying, hey, there's a poll happening right now. John Spytek wants the young guys to play and tank this season. Pete Carroll is on the opposite side. Remember, Antonio Pierce took the same approach last year. Antonio Pierce probably felt, I'm going to end up getting fired. I want to try to win some games as the season kind of comes to an end. And he did, right? And remember, the Raiders didn't make the playoffs last year. We won a couple of games at the end of the season. We ended up with the 6th overall pick. So I could see Pete Carroll being in that same boat saying, this is kind of what I want to do as the season kind of comes to an end. I don't know how the Raiders make this happen. Maybe they have to fire Pete Carroll to do that. But if that's what it takes, I think the Raiders should just do it, man. I really do think that. Um, More than that, right? I also want to watch some of the younger defensive linemen, and I think this is very important for the Raiders. JJ Pegues was I believe he was a 6th-round pick. Don't quote me on that. And then Tonka Hemingway was picked even higher than him, right? I think he was a 4th-round pick. These are guys that you invested legit picks in. There are players right now, right? And I'll give you guys an example. Deon Walker, Buffalo Bills, drafted him in the 3rd round. He starts for the Buffalo Bills. He looks like an absolute baller. That was a 3rd-round pick. That was the guy the Raiders could have drafted. The Raiders took, 3 players in the 3rd round. We could have had Deon Walker with one of those picks. And the thing with Deon Walker is he's actually a good football player. Now, Tonka Hemingway could be a good football player, but we don't actually put him out there. We don't know if he's actually any good. Now, he did play a little bit this past week. He looked okay, but I think for a rookie player, you have to play 2, 3, 4, 500 snaps until you really can kind of figure out if this guy has upside or potential or not. I think for the Raiders, you got to roll with the younger rookies. And even more than the rookies, I think the younger players, like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th-year players, are even more important. I think Charles Snowden could easily be the Raiders' 2nd best defensive end, outside of Maxx Crosby, but he doesn't get that full-time starting snaps, and he doesn't get the full-time snaps as a pass rusher. Malcolm Koonce, he obviously got hurt last year, he tore his ACL. So what we're seeing right now, I'm not surprised. I expected this from Malcolm Koonce. I expected him to be a little bit slower, to struggle just a little bit. He has gotten better as the season's kind of come to an end. But you have 5 games left. Maxx Crosby does not need to play. If he has a knee injury, keep him out. Let's put Charles Snowden, let's put Malcolm Koonce out there and let these guys start 100% of the snaps. Well, Tyree Wilson, we already know what he kind of is. I don't think the Raiders are going to pick up that 5th-year option, but you can also move him to defensive tackle potentially. Adam Butler is going to be here for a couple more years. We know what he is. Just let the guy rest for the next 5 games. Let the young players play, man. I think it can make this team so much better in the long run if you let these guys develop. Let's look into the secondary a little bit. Greedy Vance had a ton of upside coming into the Raiders camp this year. He was a guy that I think really impressed some of the reporters, a lot of the beat reporters. And again, I understand, this is like secondhand experience races, like these guys telling us that Greedy Vance looked good. It's not like we actually saw the tape, so we don't really know. But people were saying in the preseason and in training camp that Greedy Vance looked really good. If that's the case, let's let this guy play. And he did play a little bit this past week. Let's let Greedy Vance play a little bit more. Let's continue to start Darian Porter and let him have those snaps. If Pete Carroll's our coach next year, I know for a fact Eric Stokes will still be our starting corner. Even more than that, let's run some more man. Let's run some cover 1. Let's run some cover 4 potentially, and let's see if Eric Stokes can be a good corner in a normal updated scheme, right? Cover 1, cover 4, cover 6. Let's see what some of these guys have in a different type of scheme and system. And again, I know Pete Carroll's still technically the coach. It'd be smart for the Raiders to potentially fire him and move off of him to be able to kind of make that change. But, this Denver Broncos team is a good football team. They might not score 40 points on the Raiders, but they're a good football team. And again, I want to see what the Raiders can do against this team with some of the younger guys. It's a true test. The Broncos offensive line's a top 3 or 4 offensive line unit. Garrett Bowles, a really good left tackle. Quinn Menez, one of the best right guards in the entire NFL. Guy's an absolute monster. Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. Although McGlinchey's not better than Colton Miller, he's still a good offensive tackle in his own right. Which is crazy because I remember a lot of Raider fans wanted McGlinchey when both those guys are coming out. I think Colt Miller's proved to be a better offensive tackle than McGlinchey. But either way, man, the Broncos, they have a good offensive line. And I think for the Raiders, I really want to see some of the younger players. I'm not so excited to watch some of the younger, I'm not so excited to watch like Dante Thornton, but I am excited to watch Jack Bech. So let's see if he can get a little bit more snaps, maybe some targets. Maybe we can run him deep and Geno Smith can throw him some 50-50 balls. I understand the Raiders, have sucked up to this point, but maybe something clicks if you go with some of the younger guys. And I'll wrap it up with this. If what you're doing does not work, right? If you're trying a certain unit, if you're trying a certain group of wide receivers, a certain defensive line or defensive unit or defensive scheme, or even quarterback, if you're trying something and it's not working, maybe you make that change, maybe you make that switch, and that's what it is that allows you to be better. Remember, the Raiders under Josh McDaniels were really, really, really struggling. It was just a bland, it was just bland football. They made the switch to Antonio Pierce, and just like that, we had a massive spark, and we finished that season really, really strong. And we missed the playoffs by 1 game. And truth be told, we should have made the playoffs that season. The only reason we didn't is because they called an offside penalty on Jack Jones. It was not offsides, right? We went back and watched the tape. The Raiders obviously got screwed, but they could have made the playoffs that season, right? Jack Jones had blocked a field goal, or at least he had a great jump, and the field goal was missed because of the jump. That's, to me, that's what I want to see from the Raiders. Either we see that spark, even if the spark doesn't happen, I want to see the younger players. Let's see what these guys have. We have some young linebackers. Let's see what those guys have, right? Devin White, I don't know if he's the future for the Raiders, right? He's probably not, truth be told. Landon Roberts, he's not the future of the Raiders. Let's see what some of the younger guys have. I think the Raiders have good pieces, but we need to play these guys. They need to get those experience. They need to get that experience. They need to get those reps. We'll see if the Raiders actually end up doing it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think, man. What are you guys looking forward to against the Denver Broncos? What are your guys' thoughts on Maxx Crosby? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time with another video.